In the quiet stillness of basketball history, some stories shine brighter than championships. Tonight, we explore 4 journeys where the overlooked became unforgettable, where doubt transformed into destiny, and where belief proved stronger than expectations. In the early 2000s, the city of Detroit carried weight on its shoulders. The automotive industry faced challenges. Factories closed their doors, and uncertainty filled the air. But inside the Palace of Auburn Hills, something quietly extraordinary was taking shape. A basketball team was being built, piece by piece, with no superstars, no guarantees, just a collection of players who had something to prove. The Detroit Pistons of 2004 were not supposed to happen. They were assembled through patient trades and careful decisions between 2002 and 2004. Chauncey Billups arrived in 2002, a point guard who had been traded multiple times early in his career, searching for a home where he belonged. Richard Hamilton came next, a shooting guard with an unorthodox game and a protective face mask that became his signature. Tayshaun Prince was drafted, a long, slender forward from Kentucky who could defend anyone. And at the trade deadline in 2004, Ben Wallace arrived from Portland, bringing intensity and a defensive mindset that completed the puzzle. Nobody called them the favorites. Nobody predicted they would change basketball. The team finished the regular season with 54 wins and 28 losses, earning the 3rd seed in the Eastern Conference. Respectable, but not remarkable. Their starting 5 included no player ranked among the NBA's top 75 players of all time. They were good, solid, professional, but they were not legends. Not yet.
On the other side of the country, the Los Angeles Lakers gleamed with star power that seemed almost unfair. Shaquille O'Neal dominated the paint with force and finesse. Kobe Bryant moved like poetry in purple and gold. Karl Malone, one of the greatest power forwards in history, had joined the team seeking his first championship. Gary Payton, a legendary point guard, came aboard for the same reason. 4 Hall of Famers on one roster. The Lakers had reached the NBA Finals, and most observers believed the championship was already theirs. The Pistons were simply the obstacle standing in the way of destiny. But Coach Larry Brown saw something different. He saw 5 players who trusted each other completely. He saw Ben Wallace, an undrafted center who had become the most feared defender in basketball, willing his body in front of anyone who dared enter the paint. He saw a team that moved as one, switching on defense seamlessly, communicating without words, understanding the assignment. The Pistons had become the first team in NBA history to hold 5 consecutive opponents under 70 points during the regular season. Defense was not just their strength, it was their identity. The finals began in Los Angeles on June 6, 2004. The Pistons were supposed to be overwhelmed by the moment, intimidated by the crowd, outmatched by the talent. Instead, they played their game with calm precision. They held the Lakers' supporting cast to just 16 total points in Game 1 and won by 12. The message was clear. This would not be easy for the favorites.
Game after game, the Pistons suffocated the Lakers' offense.
Kobe and Shaquille could get their points, but everyone else struggled to find rhythm. The Lakers averaged just 81.8 points per game throughout the series, far below their season average. Detroit's defense was relentless, rotating perfectly, contesting every shot, making every possession feel like climbing a mountain. When Game 5 arrived on June 15th at the Palace, the series stood at 3-1 in Detroit's favor. One more win would complete the unthinkable. The building shook with energy as Billups orchestrated the offense with surgical precision, as Hamilton ran defenders through screens until they collapsed, as Prince used his impossible wingspan to disrupt passing lanes, as Wallace patrolled the paint like a guardian, as Rashid brought fire and focus to every moment. The final buzzer sounded. Detroit had won, 100-87. Chauncey Billups was named Finals MVP, averaging 21 points and 5.2 assists across the series. The Pistons had defeated a team with 4 Hall of Famers without having a single superstar of their own. They had done it with defense, with chemistry, with collective will. The celebration felt different than other championships. There were no individual superstars taking credit, no one player hoisting the trophy above everyone else. The Pistons celebrated as one, as they had played all season. In a city that understood hard work and perseverance, that knew what it meant to build something from pieces others had overlooked, this championship carried special meaning.
Detroit embodied the blue-collar spirit of their city during difficult economic times. They proved that 5 players working together could defeat 5 talented individuals working separately. They changed the conversation about what it meant to build a championship team. You did not need the biggest names. You needed the right fit, the right mindset, the right hearts. The Pistons returned to the finals in 2005, proving their championship was not a fluke, but the beginning of an era. They defined a style of basketball that prioritized defense first, where individual statistics mattered less than collective success, where every player knew their role and executed it perfectly. Other teams tried to copy the formula, but the spirit could not be replicated. It belonged to Detroit. Years later, when people discuss the greatest underdog stories in sports history, the 2004 Pistons occupy a special place. They remain the only modern team to win an NBA championship without a player ranked among the 75 greatest of all time. They proved that teamwork was not just a nice idea, but a legitimate path to glory. They showed that when 5 people trust each other completely, believe in the same goal, and refuse to let individual egos interfere with collective mission, something magical becomes possible.
Ben Wallace would win Defensive Player of the Year again in 2005 and 2006. Chauncey Billups became a 5-time All-Star and the heartbeat of the franchise. Richard Hamilton's mid-range game became unstoppable. Tyshawn Prince made one of the most famous blocks in playoff history. Rasheed Wallace brought passion that fueled the team's intensity. Together, they created something that transcended individual accomplishment. The city of Detroit embraced them not because they were flashy or famous, but because they represented the values Detroit held dear: hard work, resilience, teamwork, and refusing to accept what others said was impossible. When factories closed and times grew difficult, The Pistons reminded their city that overlooked did not mean outmatched, that underestimated did not mean unable. The 2004 championship banner hangs in Little Caesars Arena, a reminder of the night 5 players proved the experts wrong, defeated a super team, and wrote their names into history not with individual brilliance, but with collective excellence. It remains one of basketball's most beautiful lessons. Sometimes the greatest teams are not built with superstars, but with players who make each other better, who believe in something larger than themselves, and who refuse to let expectations define their destiny. In the spring of 1995, the Houston Rockets found themselves in an uncomfortable position. They were the defending NBA champions, having won the title the year prior, but something felt different. The regular season had been difficult, marked by inconsistency and questions about whether they could repeat their success. When the season ended, Houston had won 47 games and lost 35, earning them the 6th seed in the Western Conference.
No 6th seed had ever won an NBA championship. The Rockets would have no home court advantage in any playoff series. They would need to win on hostile floors against teams that had dominated them in the regular season. Most analysts believed their championship window had closed, that the magic of 1994 had been a beautiful moment that would not return. But inside the Rockets' locker room, a different story was being written. The team had made a significant move during the season. On February 14th, they acquired Clyde Drexler from the Portland Trail Blazers. Drexler was a future Hall of Famer, a graceful shooting guard who could score, pass, and defend at an elite level. More importantly, he and Hakeem Olajuwon had been college teammates at the University of Houston in the early 1980s, part of the legendary Phi Slama Jama teams that revolutionized college basketball with their high-flying, fast-paced style. They had not won a championship together in college, falling short in the 1983 title game. Now, more than a decade later, they had a chance to finish what they started. Hakeem Olajuwon carried his own motivation into the playoffs. During the regular season, David Robinson of the San Antonio Spurs had won the Most Valuable Player award. Hakeem respected Robinson's game, but he believed the award should have been his. He had averaged 27.8 points, 10.8 rebounds, and 3.4 blocks during the regular season. He was the heart of the defending champions. The MVP vote felt like disrespect, and Hakeem stored that feeling away, waiting for the right moment to respond. The playoffs began, and Houston faced a brutal path. They would need to defeat 4 teams that had each won at least 50 games during the regular season. The first challenge came against the Utah Jazz, who had won 60 games. The Rockets won the series in 5 games, with Hakeem dominating inside and Drexler bringing the speed and athleticism that opened up the offense. Next came the Phoenix Suns, a talented team led by Charles Barkley.
Kevin Johnson and Dan Majerle. The Suns had won 59 games and carried home court advantage. The series went back and forth, intense and physical. Phoenix took a 3-1 lead, and it appeared Houston's season was over. No team had ever come back from such a deficit in a 7-game series. But the Rockets refused to accept defeat. They won Game 5 in Phoenix, then Game 6 at home. Game 7 returned to Phoenix, and Houston completed the comeback, winning on the road to advance. Hakeem had been magnificent, averaging 33.1 points in the series. The Western Conference Finals matched Houston against San Antonio. This was Hakeem's moment to answer the MVP question. He faced David Robinson, and the contrast was stark. Hakeem averaged 35.3 points in the series, dominating both ends of the floor with footwork and skill that seemed impossible for a 7-footer. In the final 2 games, he outscored Robinson by a combined margin of 81 points to 41. The Spurs had no answer for his post moves, his fadeaways, his timing on blocks. Houston won the series in 6 games, punching their ticket to the NBA Finals.
Their opponent was the Orlando Magic, a young and explosive team led by Shaquille O'Neal and Anthony Hardaway. The Magic had swept their way through the Eastern Conference playoffs and were heavily favored. They had youth, athleticism, and a dominant center in O'Neal, who seemed unstoppable. Game 1 was in Orlando, and the Magic held home court advantage throughout the series. What happened next became the stuff of legend. Game 1 went to overtime, tied at 110. With 0.3 of a second remaining in overtime, Hakeem tipped in a miss to give Houston a 120-118 victory. They had stolen home court advantage in the most dramatic fashion possible. Kenny Smith had hit 7 3-pointers in the game, setting an NBA Finals record. The Rockets had announced they would not go quietly. Game 2 stayed in Orlando, and Houston won again, 117-106. Hakeem scored 34 points with 11 rebounds. The series shifted to Houston, with the Rockets holding a 2-0 lead. They won Game 3 at home, 106-103. Hakeem had 31 points and 10 rebounds. One more victory would complete the sweep. Game 4 on June 14, 1995, at the Summit in Houston, felt like destiny arriving on schedule. The Rockets controlled the game with veteran poise, never letting Orlando back into the series. They won 113-101. Hakeem finished with 35 points and 15 rebounds. The sweep was complete. The championship had returned to Houston.
Hakeem Olajuwon had been transcendent throughout the playoffs. He averaged 33 points on 53.1% shooting, 10.3 rebounds, and 2.81 blocks across 22 playoff games. He became the only player in NBA history to sweep the finals while scoring at least 30 points in every game. His performance throughout the 1995 playoffs remains one of the greatest individual postseason runs in basketball history. Coach Rudy Tomjanovich stood at the podium after Game 4, exhausted and emotional. He had guided his team through impossible odds, through doubters, through the weight of defending a championship as a sixth seed. His voice cracked as he delivered words that would define the journey. Don't ever underestimate the heart of a champion. The phrase captured everything about Houston's run. They had defeated teams with 60 wins, 59 wins, 62 wins, and 57 wins. They had won series on the road, come back from 3 games to 1 down, and swept the finals. They had done it all without home court advantage in any round. They remain the lowest-seeded team to ever win an NBA championship, a record that may never be broken. For Hakeem and Clyde, the championship carried special meaning. They had been college teammates who fell short of glory. Now, in the professional ranks, they had achieved what once seemed impossible. After the final buzzer, Hakeem spoke about winning with his old friend. "We didn't do it together in college, and came back and did it in the pros," he said quietly, the weight of the journey evident in his voice. Houston became only the 5th franchise in NBA history to win back-to-back championships. They joined the Lakers, Celtics, Pistons, and Bulls in that exclusive club. But their path was different than the others. They had done it the hard way, through doubt and adversity, proving that seeding was just a number, and expectations were just opinions. The 1995 Rockets showed that championships were not always won by the team with the best regular season record or the most talent on paper. Sometimes they were won by the team with the most heart, the most resilience, the most refusal to accept what seemed inevitable. They were won by players who believed in each other when nobody else did, who found strength in being underestimated, who turned doubt into fuel. Years later, when people discussed the most difficult championship runs in NBA history, the 1995 Rockets stand alone. No team has matched their achievement of winning as a 6th seed. No team has faced a more challenging path to glory. And no player has dominated the playoffs quite like Hakeem did that spring, moving through defenses like water flowing around stones, unstoppable and inevitable. The championship banner hangs in Toyota Center, a reminder that titles are not given to the favorites, but earned by those willing to fight through every obstacle, to win every difficult game, to prove that heart matters more than seeding. The 1995 Rockets did not just win a championship, they redefined what was possible, showing that the journey matters as much as the destination, and that sometimes the greatest victories come from the most unexpected places. In February 2012, Jeremy Lin was sleeping on his teammate's couch in New York City, wondering if his NBA dream was over before it truly began. He had been cut by 2 teams already. The New York Knicks had nearly waived him multiple times. He was the last guard on the bench, getting minimal playing time, watching games unfold from a distance. For most people observing from the outside, Jeremy Lin was just another player who would not make it, another name that would fade into obscurity. But Jeremy's journey to that couch had been unlike any other player in NBA history. He was born to Taiwanese immigrant parents in Palo Alto, California, growing up in a household that valued education and hard work above everything else. He fell in love with basketball as a child, studying the game obsessively, practicing until the streetlights came on, dreaming of playing at the highest level. Despite dominating high school basketball in California, not a single Division I program offered Jeremy a scholarship. Coaches looked at his resume, watched his games, and decided he was not athletic enough, not big enough, not the right fit. The rejections stung, but they did not stop him. He chose to attend Harvard University, an Ivy League school not known for producing NBA players. While his peers at major basketball programs received national attention, Jeremy played in relative anonymity, leading Harvard to their best records in decades, earning all-conference honors 3 times.
When the 2010 NBA draft arrived, Jeremy waited to hear his name called. It never was. He went undrafted, joining the Golden State Warriors for the Summer League and eventually signing with them for the regular season. But the opportunity was limited. He spent most of his time in the Development League, playing for the Reno Bighorns while dreaming of his chance. After the season, Golden State waived him. The Houston Rockets signed him, and then they waived him too. 2 teams in his home state of California had decided he was not good enough. The Knicks picked him up in December 2011, but his situation was precarious. He barely played. Coach Mike D'Antoni used him sparingly, usually in garbage time when games were already decided. Behind the scenes, the team discussed cutting him multiple times to make room on the roster. Jeremy knew his time was running out. Every practice, every moment on the bench felt like it could be his last in the NBA.
The challenges Jeremy faced went beyond basketball. He was the first American player of Chinese or Taiwanese descent in NBA history. Some scouts had openly questioned whether an Asian American could compete at the highest level. Stereotypes that had nothing to do with skill or heart, but everything to do with outdated assumptions. Years later, NBA Commissioner David Stern would suggest that race had played a role in Jeremy going undrafted, acknowledging biases that many preferred to ignore. On February 4, 2012, everything changed. Point guard Baron Davis suffered an injury, and the Knicks desperately needed someone to run the offense. They were struggling, having lost 11 of 13 games. The season was slipping away. With few options remaining, Coach D'Antoni turned to Jeremy. In his first significant playing time against the New Jersey Nets, Jeremy scored 25 points. The performance was unexpected, but not quite explosive. Maybe it was a fluke, a good game from a desperate player against a weak opponent. 3 days later, the Utah Jazz came to Madison Square Garden. Jeremy started and scored 28 points with 8 assists. The crowd began to take notice. This was not a fluke. This was something real. 2 days after that, against the Washington Wizards, Jeremy dropped 23 points with 10 assists. The Knicks won all 3 games. Suddenly, the player who had been sleeping on a couch, who had nearly been cut multiple times, was leading the New York Knicks to victories in the world's most famous arena.
Then came February 10th, 2012, a night that would define Linsanity forever. The Los Angeles Lakers visited Madison Square Garden, bringing Kobe Bryant and a team full of stars. The matchup seemed impossible for Jeremy. He would be facing one of the greatest players in NBA history, on national television, with the world watching. Instead of shrinking from the moment, Jeremy delivered a performance that left people speechless. He scored 38 points with 7 assists, outplaying Kobe down the stretch, hitting big shots, running the offense with confidence that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The Knicks won, and Jeremy had announced himself to the world. The victories kept coming. Jeremy became the first player in NBA history to score at least 20 points and 7 assists in each of his first 5 starts. Against the Toronto Raptors on February 14th, he hit a game-winning 3-pointer at the buzzer, waving off his entire team to create the shot himself. The basketball swishing through the net as 20,000 people erupted. The Knicks won 7 straight games with Jeremy leading the way. He averaged 18.5 points and 7.6 assists during his hot streak, playing with joy and creativity that made basketball feel new again. The phenomenon became known as Linsanity, a cultural movement that transcended sports. Within the first week, his name generated over 2.1 million Google search results. He appeared on the cover of Sports Illustrated with the headline, "Against All Odds." Asian American communities across the country saw themselves reflected in Jeremy's success, celebrating not just a basketball player, but a barrier broken, a stereotype shattered,
A dream realized against every expectation.
The story was not just about basketball statistics. It was about a kid who had been told no at every level, who kept working when others would have quit, who believed in himself when nobody else did. It was about an undrafted Harvard graduate proving that intelligence and heart could overcome athletic measurables. It was about an Asian American player showing that excellence had no ethnicity, that talent could not be limited by outdated assumptions. The magic lasted through February before Jeremy suffered a meniscus tear that ended his season early. The injury was devastating, coming just as he had found his footing in the NBA. But even with the shortened run, the impact was undeniable. In 26 games with meaningful minutes, Jeremy had changed the conversation about who could succeed in the NBA, where talent could come from, what an underdog story could look like. The Knicks went 16 wins and 10 losses with Jeremy leading the team, proving his impact was real and measurable. He signed a lucrative contract with the Houston Rockets the following summer, and though he never quite recaptured the pure magic of those February weeks, his career continued for nearly a decade. He played for 7 different teams, always professional, always grateful, always carrying himself with humility that made people root for him. In 2019, Jeremy won an NBA championship with the Toronto Raptors. Though his role was limited, the accomplishment meant everything. He had gone from undrafted to champion, from sleeping on couches to holding a championship trophy. After the victory, tears streamed down his face as he processed the journey. Every rejection and every doubt transformed into fuel for perseverance. Jeremy's legacy extended beyond his playing career. He challenged stereotypes about Asian American athletes, opening doors for future generations. He showed that Ivy League players could compete at the highest level. He proved that being undrafted did not define your ceiling, that opportunities could arrive unexpectedly, and that preparation meeting chance created magic. Young players who did not fit traditional molds looked at Jeremy and saw possibility. Kids who looked like him saw a reflection that had not existed before. The Linsanity phenomenon remains one of the most captivating stories in modern sports history. For a few weeks in February 2012, the entire basketball world watched an underdog become a star, a forgotten player become unforgettable, and a couch surfer become a household name. Jeremy Lin showed that sometimes the best stories are not about the #1 draft picks or the anointed superstars, but about the players who refuse to accept no as a final answer, who keep working when cameras are not watching, who believe that talent and perseverance can overcome any obstacle. Years later, when people remember Linsanity, they remember more than the statistics and the victories. They remembered the joy Jeremy played with, the smile that never left his face, the way he made basketball feel like a celebration rather than a job. They remember a moment when anything felt possible, when an underdog captured hearts around the world, and when a player who was sleeping on a couch became one of the most famous athletes on the planet. That feeling, that reminder that dreams can come true in the most unexpected ways,
remains Jeremy Lin's greatest gift to the game he loved so much.
On the night of the 1996 NBA Draft, Ben Wallace sat in a gym in Whitehall, Alabama, watching names scroll across the television screen. Round 1 came and went. Round 2 followed. 58 players were selected. Ben's name was never called. When the broadcast ended, when it became clear that no NBA team had chosen him, Ben did not go home to sulk or question his dream. Instead, he stayed in that gym and did bench press repetitions for every single player who had been drafted ahead of him. 58 names, 58 reminders, 58 reasons to prove everyone wrong. Ben was born on September 10th, 1974, the 10th of 11 children, in a family that understood hard work and perseverance. His childhood in Whitehall was modest, and basketball became his path forward. He played at Cuyahoga Community College, a junior college in Ohio, where he averaged 17 rebounds and nearly 7 blocks per game. His energy and defensive intensity were obvious, but at 6 feet 9 inches, scouts worried he was too small to play center in the NBA and not skilled enough to play forward. He transferred to Virginia Union, a Division II school, where he continued to dominate defensively. But Division II players rarely made it to the NBA, and Ben's offensive game was raw. He could not shoot from distance. His free throw percentage was poor. Scouts saw the limitations before they saw the potential. When draft night arrived, every team in the league passed on him. Some took chances on projects. Others selected international players. Ben Wallace was left undrafted, unwanted, overlooked. But Ben had something that could not be measured in combine drills or shooting percentages. He had a motor that never stopped, a willingness to do the dirty work, and pride that would not allow him to fail. He did not demand the ball or need to score 30 points to feel valuable. He would rebound, defend, set screens, dive for loose balls, and do whatever his team needed.
After going undrafted, Ben briefly played basketball in Italy, trying to keep his dream alive overseas. The Washington Bullets saw enough to bring him back, signing him midway through the 1996 to 1997 season. For 3 years, Ben played off the bench in Washington, learning the NBA game, understanding what it took to survive. In 1999, he was traded to the Orlando Magic, where he finally got a chance to start, playing 81 games and showing flashes of the defensive dominance that would define his career. The following summer, the Orlando Magic made a decision that would change NBA history. They traded Ben Wallace to the Detroit Pistons as part of a deal to acquire Grant Hill, a superstar forward. On paper, the trade seemed lopsided in Orlando's favor. They were getting an all-star. Detroit was getting an undrafted defensive specialist. But sometimes value is not measured in points per game or all-star appearances. In Detroit, Ben found his home. Coach Larry Brown appreciated defense above everything else.
and Ben became the foundation of the Pistons' identity. During the 2001 to 2002 season, Ben led the entire NBA in rebounding with 13.0 per game and blocks with 3.5 per game. His afro became iconic, his intensity became legendary, and his defensive impact became undeniable. At the end of the season, he won his first Defensive Player of the Year award, an extraordinary achievement for a player who had gone undrafted.
The accolades kept coming. Ben won Defensive Player of the Year again in 2003, 2005, and 2006, tying Dikembe Mutombo's record of 4 career wins. He became the anchor of a Pistons team that would win the championship in 2004, holding opponents to season lows, changing shots with his presence, rebounding as if every missed shot was personal. In the finals against the Lakers, Ben averaged 10.8 points, 13.6 rebounds, 1.8 steals, and 1 block per game. His defense on Shaquille O'Neal was masterful, using positioning and timing to compensate for any size disadvantage. Ben was selected to 4 All-Star games, and in 2004, he became the only undrafted player in NBA history to start an All-Star game. The recognition felt surreal for someone who had not been drafted, who had been told he was not good enough, who had spent that draft night doing bench press repetitions in an empty gym. Now he was starting among the best players in the world, proof that talent evaluators could be wrong, that heart mattered as much as measurables. On February 14, 2012, playing for the Detroit Pistons in what would be his final season, Ben played in his 1,055th NBA game, surpassing John Starks for the most games played by an undrafted player in league history. The record was another reminder of his longevity, his durability, his refusal to let being overlooked define his career. Throughout his 16-year career, Ben averaged just 5.7 points per game and shot 41.4% from the free throw line. By traditional offensive metrics, he was limited, but those numbers missed the entire story. Ben changed games without scoring. He protected the rim with a ferocity that made opponents think twice before driving to the basket. He rebounded with perfect timing and instinct. He communicated on defense, directing teammates, switching seamlessly, making everyone around him better. His agent, Arn Tellem, who represented many star players over 35 years, once said that no client had ever worked harder than Ben Wallace. The statement was remarkable, coming from someone who had represented dozens of All-Stars and Hall of Famers. But Ben's work ethic was legendary. He was always the first in the gym, the last to leave, treating every practice like a playoff game, never taking a single moment for granted. Coach Larry Brown, who had coached some of the greatest players in basketball history, spoke about Ben with reverence. He maximized his talent and showed people, if you work on your game, you defend every play, you try to rebound every ball. It's not about getting 30, Brown explained. The lesson was profound. Success was not only defined by scoring averages or highlight reels.
It could be defined by commitment, by doing the little things perfectly, by making your teammates better.
On January 16, 2016, the Detroit Pistons retired Ben's number 3 jersey, raising it to the rafters at the Palace of Auburn Hills. The ceremony celebrated not just a great player, but a symbol of what was possible when talent met determination, when being overlooked became motivation rather than defeat. The entire city of Detroit, a place that understood being underestimated, embraced Ben as one of their own. He represented their values: hard work, resilience, pride, and doing things the right way. 5 years later, on May 16, 2021, Ben Wallace was inducted into the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. He became the first undrafted player in NBA history to receive the honor. The induction speech was emotional, filled with gratitude for everyone who believed in him when belief was scarce. He thanked his family, his coaches, his teammates, and the city of Detroit. He spoke about the chip on his shoulder that never went away, the fuel that drove him every single day to prove he belonged. Ben's legacy extends beyond his personal achievements. He changed how teams evaluated players, showing that traditional scouting metrics missed crucial intangibles like heart, motor, and defensive instincts. He inspired countless undrafted players who followed, proving that the draft was not the final word on potential. He showed that greatness could be achieved through defense and rebounding, that you did not need to score to be valuable, that impact came in many forms.
Young players who went undrafted looked at Ben Wallace's career and saw a blueprint. They saw that being overlooked was not permanent, that opportunities would come if you stayed ready, that skill development and work ethic mattered more than pedigree. They saw that Hall of Fame careers could start outside the draft, that championships could be won by players nobody wanted, that respect was earned through performance rather than reputation. The 4 Defensive Player of the Year awards, the championship ring, the All-Star appearances, the retired jersey, and the Hall of Fame induction all tell the story of Ben Wallace's career. But the most important part of his legacy is simpler and more profound. He proved that where you start does not determine where you finish. He showed that 58 teams could be wrong, that one night of disappointment could fuel 16 years of excellence, and that an undrafted kid from Alabama could become one of the greatest defensive players in basketball history.
On that draft night in 1996, when Ben Wallace did bench press repetitions for every player selected ahead of him, he made a promise to himself. He would not let being overlooked define him. He would work harder than everyone else. He would prove his value every single night. He would show that championships were won by heart as much as talent. And over 16 years, Ben Wallace kept that promise, transforming doubt into determination, rejection into resilience, and an undrafted dream into a Hall of Fame reality. 4 journeys, 4 lessons written in basketball history. The Pistons taught us that teamwork
transcends talent. The Rockets showed us that champions never surrender. Jeremy reminded us that dreams persist despite rejection. And Ben proved that overlooked does not mean outmatched. Rest now, knowing that belief and perseverance can overcome any obstacle.